Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
Rap world. Oh, it's free education in middle school, high school, and
So I was a math teacher and an academic coach in public middle and high schools in Boston for about 6 years.
and you create something called Bootstrap World. That's Bootstrap at bootstrapworld.org. And this is a curriculum for middle school and high school students in coding.
Yep. Yeah, so students learn computer programming as a vehicle specifically for learning algebraic and geometric concepts.
Now, I came to you through a kind of roundabout method, and we often talk, people are always asking me, even as adults, I want to learn how to code. What's the best way? Actually, usually they don't say that. They say, what language should I learn? And a lot of times, that used to be for a long time, it was Visual Basic, and now it's, the trends, the fads change. Now it's Ruby, or maybe Ruby on Rails, or, maybe, I don't know, Haskell or Erlang. I don't know. It's always changing. It's a moving target. But I think what I try to tell people is, it's one thing if you want to learn, like, get a job, that's one thing. You should learn probably Java or JavaScript, something that's going to give you a great head start in the professional world, or .NET, certainly. But there's another reason to learn how to code. The reason I love coding, it's fun. It's great to be able to create something that helps you yourself, and it also gives you a great and deep understanding of how computers work. There's an even more important reason, and I learned that. So what I did is I started to point people to a program that was developed, a book printed by the MIT Press, developed for teaching at Rice, called "How to Design Programs: An Introduction to Programming and Computing" by Matthias Falesin. I think that's how I don't know how you pronounce his name, but sorry, Matthias. And I was talking about this on the air, and one of his co-authors, Sriram Krishnamurthy, wrote to me, emailed me, and said, you got some of the details wrong. I was saying Duke, not Rice, 4-letter and he said, and I said, well, please, let's go on, because I've been telling people about this book for years. You see, it says September 2003 version, but Matthias is doing a second edition, which is more up to date. It hasn't even come out in print yet. And by the way, I would recommend the second edition, because there's some significant differences. But the point, what inspired me, and I, by the way, have worked my way through this book. I love it. It is a great way to learn coding the right way. And what inspired me is this kind of notion that maybe people aren't learning coding from the right direction. So I said, Sriram, come on and let's talk about this. And he said, no, you don't want to talk to me. You want to talk to Emmanuel. So thank you, Sriram, for introducing me to Emmanuel, and welcome, Emmanuel, to Triangulation. What's wrong?
It's great to be here, and thanks for throwing me into the hot seat.
What's wrong with how we teach programming today?
There's a couple of things that I think are missing. For one thing, I think that there's a lot of great work being done in a lot of angles as far as teaching programming. But I think that there are two, maybe three.
Oh, good. Phone rebooted.
just because we give them problems to solve. And we have this idea that, well, I gave my kids this problem and they solved it, so they must have learned something about what it means to solve problems. And that's not entirely true, and it's actually not backed up by any research, right? Finishing a puzzle doesn't mean you got better at solving puzzles. If you do it enough, maybe there's something magic that will happen and the kids will sort of figure it out. But there's very little attention being paid to what does it mean to explicitly teach this thing, right? We don't just give kids tons of math problems and hope that they'll figure math out. We teach them some math and then give them problems to try to practice getting good at solving them. So there's this missing piece of what does it mean to write software to solve problems using programming. So that's one thing, and I think that's personally why I fell in love with how design programs. I think the second challenge is that we're emphasizing coding more than programming. So let me explain what I mean by the difference there. I think coding, as a former programmer, coding is the last step in programming, right? I've thought through I've thought through the problem, I've come up with some test cases, and then finally the last thing I do is I sit down at the computer and I type in stuff that the computer will understand. But when you focus so much on typing in the stuff, right, like there's all this effort right now paid to making it as easy as possible to get kids to write instructions on the computer, you miss out on all the stuff that programming actually helps you learn. I mean, when I was a CS major, I remember we would draw diagrams on a whiteboard, we'd sketch things out, we'd talk it through. There was a whole discipline to programming, and coding was just sort of the last step, in the same way that, putting together a building is maybe the last step to a huge discipline of architecture. So I think emphasizing the programming approach as opposed to just making it easy to code is probably the second challenge for teaching computer science right now. And I think that the third one really has to do with this issue of transfer, which is if you're preaching to the choir, if we say, look, we want kids to learn how to program, or we all want to learn to code, great, the choir will believe you, but they already believe you. And so as long as you keep doing that, telling people that coding is good because coding is good, you're just going to get the same people done. Right? What's missing is the transfer argument that says you should learn to program because it will also teach you stuff that will help you in all these other fields.
And that's key.
And that argument, exactly. That argument really hasn't been made well and hasn't been backed up by data. So I think that's what the issues are that we're facing right now.
Even President Obama said his daughter should learn to code. He wishes he had learned to code. There's the hour of code. There is this great momentum towards coding, but I kind of wish people had stepped back and really thought about the curriculum before they launched into this. You can go to Code Academy, that's great. You can learn how to Ruby there or JavaScript. There's lots of ways to learn, but there's not a lot of attention paid towards pedagogy and teaching, but also what's the right way to think about it. I feel like we're going to create, to paraphrase coding, that's not coding, that's typing. We're going to create a bunch of spaghetti coders, which is how I learned. I was basic, I was self-taught, and I unlearned a lot of really bad habits. One of the things I like about HTTP is, in fact, if you read nothing else, go to http.org and read the preface to the second edition. It takes a really good argument that coding is, what we're doing here is not just teaching somebody how to be a computer programmer, we're teaching them how to think. In school they often always talk about learning math, because it teaches you a way of reasoning, a way of thinking, a way of logic that's useful all across the board. And I think to some degree coding can maybe not take the place, but coding can sit side by side with the math curriculum as a way of teaching people how to think, whether or not you're going to be a computer programmer. I don't have base.
No, I think you've got it spot on. It's a discipline, it's a way of thinking, and if we value that separately from the typing part of the discipline, then we got to think about what it means to teach that. Otherwise, we're just teaching kids better ways to type.
Yeah. They should learn that. I'm not saying they shouldn't.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times, I've got resistance from educators saying, no, but Frank, if they want to teach them, what's this language bracket? Shouldn't they be learning something useful? I think they miss the point a little bit. And what has happened is teaching coding has really become code for teaching somebody how to get a job in computer science. And that's really, it's much more important than that.
That's right. Yeah, we've got this middle ground. We've gotten really good at getting young kids excited. We've got some fantastic tools that get kids excited. And then at the opposite end of the pipeline, we've got these companies that say, hey, the flavor of the month right now is Ruby, or it's Python, or it's Java. And teachers are stuck in the middle because the question is not how do we get kids jobs in Google. The question is, what's the bridge between the two? How do we take those kids who are engaged and build up the fundamentals for perhaps someday getting a job, or perhaps for something else? Right? If everything was about getting a job, there's a lot of stuff we wouldn't teach in high schools or middle schools.
We're talking with Emmanuel Schnitzer, who talks more about Bootstrap, which is the curriculum. If you're a teacher or you're not teachers, you'll definitely want to stay tuned for this, because I really think this is the way that this should be taught. And it's high school, it's middle school, that maybe even better to start younger. I'd love to talk about, we call them the take a toy techniques, like that. Like these app advantages from Google. We can also talk about tools like Tinker. We talk about this before tonight. That teaches take a toy program. And I'm very excited about this. Hang on, we'll get more in just a second. First, I got to tell you about smart things. Everybody wants to do automation. But if you're like me, you said, oh, good, launch into it, and you're like, let me talk to anything else. I have View Lights, I have Sonos, you got the Schlage Bluetooth lock, you got Garage, and have your music played with two keys, just so cool. So you got a smart thing, you got a smart thing, extended the things that smart things talk to, like Dropcam, Schlage lock, things, security, or solution. It's such a good idea. We were talking to...
So, when I left the private sector, I had this dream that I would be a computer science teacher, maybe it might be. And so that was sort of the wake-up call to me, and the competence for me. And I thought back to the fact that when I was in high school, I was one of those kids. I just memorized how to solve different types of problems. I just wrote this as a curriculum for my own class. I was fortunate enough to be linked up with Matthias Bison. We actually met randomly on a train. And years later, I discovered that Northeastern University had this summer camp run by a bunch of students that was teaching functional programming to kids. So serendipity struck, and I was able to get a part-time job because that gave me more opportunities to experiment with the curriculum. And over the years, gradually other teachers, but also engineers or undergrad computer science majors, started asking me if they could use the curriculum as well. And over time, the curriculum has grown and been refined. In 2007, I linked up with Sridham Krishnamurthy and Kathy Fissler, professors at Brown and Worcester Polytech. And at that point, Bootstrap really took off and matured into sort of a finished product. So, we've got a nice booklet here for teachers, all the lesson materials, accompanying student material for kids. And now it's evolved into something that can be integrated into a mainstream algebra class or developed as a computer science elective, as a standalone class for schools.
I think that's interesting. So it's easy for a school to integrate because it fits their math program. They don't have to say, oh, we're going to teach something in computer science. It's algebra. Let me ask you, though, you said a phrase, and that's really important to describe this. What is functional? What is a functional language?
Yeah, so a functional programming language means a programming language that sort of behaves the way that math behaves. So functional languages are very declarative, meaning that you write code that you sort of declare what the code should do, and you don't need to think at the same time as what the machine should be doing to execute the code.
So what language is your functional? What language is your functional? Lisp or Scheme, you said?
Lisp, Scheme, OCaml, Haskell, Racket, Pirate. There's a whole bunch of functional programming languages out there.
I know every time I say Lisp, people go, oh no, I don't want to type parentheses.
Yes, but functional programming languages don't all have parentheses.
Okay.
They're really good for some stuff, but yes, when I say functional programming, I don't mean you have to have parentheses. In fact, one of the languages we use doesn't have parentheses.
So I've been a big fan. It's cool that you have MIT's because I've been a big fan of this book at HTTP, how to design programs. And what I love is MIT's put that book online. It's free. It uses a functional programming language called Racket, and you can download Dr. Racket. And what's cool about that is not only is it a full-blown language that you could actually write full programs in, but it has modules or teaching packs that allow you to dumb it down, start at kind of a simple level, and then add features. So one of the things that happens when kids start to learn a program or anybody is you get weird error messages. What does that mean? So it looks more sensible. It's designed to teach.
Yeah, that's right, and that's sort of the part that I'm talking about as far as this emphasis on what does it mean to teach programming, not just getting kids to code. And Matthias and the PLT group really pioneered with Dr. Racket that depending on the language level you're in, sometimes for a beginner you want a constrained language, because the more constrained it is, the more helpful error messages you can give, because there's only so many things that they could have intended to do. So if they do it wrong, you can give them helpful feedback.
I actually love Dr. Racket. I install it on my computers because it's a fun thing to play with. You have a REPL loop, read, evaluate, parse, read, evaluate. What is it? And then loop back. Read, evaluate.
Right, the read, eval, print.
Print. And so another way to talk about that would be it's like an interpreter. So you can type in commands. And I think for teaching, it's one of the reasons I also love Python for teaching. It's very natural to be able to, as you're starting to learn a program, try stuff. And it'll give you a result right away. You just type in, 2 plus 2, and it'll give you a result. Now, there's one weird thing about Racket. It's a postfix, not infix.
Prefix.
A prefix, not infix. So does that confuse people? So it's not 2 plus 2, it's plus 2, 2.
That's right. So anybody who learned to program on an HP calculator is really familiar with putting the function first.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's funny because the people who learned on the HP calculators, they often are so addicted to it that they'll switch to something else after you pry it from their cold dead hands.
It's really true.
There's a very intuitive way of thinking about arithmetic operations where you put the function first. It's no different than the way we do every other function, right? I mean, imagine if you're trying to program something in JavaScript, Python, pick your favorite language. If you've got a function that loads an image, and another function that maybe rotates that image, and another function that stretches that image out, if you want to do all three at once, you wrap one function inside the other. You don't put them in between each other. So this idea of infix notation is actually very weird. You don't see it in any other programming language. You don't see it in any other branch of mathematics. And yet, for all these languages that use infix, they keep this strange sort of bastardized thing. The plus goes in the middle. So Racket breaks with this. Racket says the function goes in the beginning, just like every other function you use. And it's funny. We don't see a lot of people getting confused by necessarily that, as much as they need to know why. Right? It's not like they can't figure out the plus comes first. They want to know why it comes first. And
once you explain it,
there's actually some really interesting history here about the way we teach math and why people expect plus to come in the middle, but everything else.
Yeah, this is the Dr. Racket page, which I'm going to point people to if they want to download racket-lang.org. And they do at the bottom of the page recommend how to design programs. The realm of Racket's a lot of fun, also a great way to teach kids. But if you're going to do a curriculum, I think it's a really appropriate place to start is bootstrapworld.org. And you use that, which is interesting. I'm thrilled to find this. Dr. Racket-like browser-based programming tool called WeScheme.
Yep, that's right. So if you have a web browser and internet connection, you already have our software installed. There's nothing to download, nothing to install. All the files live in the cloud. It's really handy as a teacher.
So this is where you enter a program. I'm going to go down below just to show the little interpreter here, and I can do. This is the notation plus 2. Oops. Plus. Oh, got shift on. Plus 2.
You can grab that gray bar and drag it up if you like as well.
Oh, good. Make it a little bit bigger. And this is on the browser. That's cool. So you. Oh, it didn't do it. Did I do something wrong?
Yeah, well, so Racket is one of those languages where you need parentheses.
Yeah. You learn this very quickly. That's one of the great things about having an interpreter. And then you see it's balanced to 4. Good. Very nice. Now, this error message is an example of an error message that might confuse. Is there a way to... How do you handle that?
So that's actually not an error message. So what you typed in on that first line there was 3 different programs. The first one was the program plus, which is a function. In fact, try now, just type in plus by itself.
Okay. There you go.
And there you go.
Same
It's
thing.
telling you plus is a function whose name is plus.
So I've actually queried the interpreter to say, what is plus? And it's telling me. Just as if I
Yeah,
wrote,
so-
quote, hello world, end quote, and it would repeat it back. Oh, that's a string called hello world.
That's right. So in this language, and in all functional programming languages, functions are values, and you can pass them around just like you would the number 2 or 3 or the string hello world. So
Yeah.
2 is a value, and if you type in 2, it prints out 2.
Right.
Hello world is a value. You type in hello world, it prints out hello world. Plus is also a value.
Got it.
And when you have functions that can be treated as values, you can do really cool stuff. That's how higher order functions work. You can pass functions around to each other.
So how do you incorporate this into a math curriculum? Do you tell me about that? Tell me about that.
Sure. So in a math curriculum, around using different components of algebra to build functions into algebra. So I'll give you a quick example. In Bootstrap, the final product is that kids build a simple video game of their own design. And the first step in doing this is that kids want to import images, bring them into their program, and have them show up on the screen. So we teach them, simple coordinate systems and so on, which they then use to position all the characters on the screen. So you might have your leprechaun up here, and then your shark over here, and the kids can say, okay, that's my game. I see what it's going to look like, but nothing's moving just yet. And so then from there we say, well, what does it mean for a character? And they say, well, I already want coordinates, so I know how to put a character here, but I want this character to move a little bit, side to side. And so that gives us a model for introducing the importance of functions. So instead of saying this character's position is the number 10, we might say this position is defined with respect to time. And so they write a linear function that makes their character fly across the screen, and it goes off the edge and never comes back. And the kid says, all right, it's cool that it moved, but it's supposed to come back. How do I make it come back?
Yeah.
And we ask them again, well, when should it come back? What do you mean by that? And they say, well, when it's off the edge of the screen, when it's off this edge, I know it should come back. Okay, so what is the x-coordinate when it's off the screen? Oh, it's less than 0. So we introduce inequalities in the plane. And so we introduce Boolean inequalities and an OR, union intersection. And so kids are learning the math to bring things back on the screen. Responding to key events, moving up and down. If I hit the up or down key, that's a piecewise function. Collision detection, when 2 things blow up. Well, you only know how far apart they are if you know the distance formula. That's the Pythagorean theorem. So each piece of the video game comes from a part of algebra that they need to know. And when they're using that, they're programming this stuff in using a programming language that behaves exactly the way the math does in their textbook. So there's no assignment, there's no for loops. Every construct they're using can be found right in the regular math book, as opposed to teaching them something that's totally different and weird and behaves nothing like math. We're teaching them the math itself. So that has a benefit for students because they see the transfer. And this also has a benefit for math teachers because math teachers don't need to learn 50 new constructs that don't exist in math. They can do it using only what they already know as math teachers.
That's really cool because you're right. Kids, if they're doing it, the first thing they say is, okay, I want to write a game. So immediately you grab their interest. And I bet you, the problem with math for me always was it's very abstract. And so I know that certainly when you learn physics, having some experiential things to go along with the rules you're learning makes Newtonian physics really easy to learn. You push something in and go, and having this, it's great. It makes math experiential. They're actually experiencing what happens.
That's right. And in fact, there's actually, so everyone sort of knows about SIGME, right? The structure and interpretation of computer programming, for the famous MIT. There's another book that Sussman and Abelson wrote that teaches mechanics through programming.
Oh, that's great.
Right? And it's the same concept. It's about directly applying programming to make the math of physics real. And so that's exactly what we're doing here as far as algebra goes. We're making algebra real by having kids program something that they care about.
You've been doing this almost for 10 years. Do you have any results, any studies that show how effective it is?
We do, and we're actually really excited about this. So the phenomenon that you're asking about is called transfer, which literally means by doing something in domain A, do kids automatically get better at this other domain B, as long as the domains are related. And it's been really hard to prove transfer between programming and algebra. A lot of folks have tried in the past. What we've done in the last year is we've been giving out these pre and post tests to students in 6 schools across the country. Middle and high schools, 8th and 9th grade algebra, and computer science. And the pre and post tests have no programming on them whatsoever. Every single problem on the test is a straight up pencil and paper algebra problem. Many of which are actually borrowed from the Massachusetts MCAS. So same kind of math problems kids are going to see on the test. And what we found is a statistically significant improvement across the board from students on these tests. So we do see evidence of transfer of kids getting better at algebra by doing this computer program. So if you're a principal or a superintendent, maybe you don't have room for computer science, but chances are you've got room to help kids in math. And so for us, that's the main argument. Programming is great. We think you should do it. But if you're not already sold, how about helping students with algebra?
Absolutely. In fact, it says on the bootstrap.org site that you are aligned with Common Core for algebra.
That's right. So, Common Core is pushing algebra into 8th grade as opposed to primarily a high school class like it used to be. But it's not just Common Core, right? So in Texas, the standards are also moving algebra down to the middle school range. So, Common Core is sort of a useful signpost for us. But even if you're not in a Common Core state, the trend is teaching algebra earlier. And if that's your concern, you've got a great way to learn it.
Mm-hmm. Kids seem to really enjoy the experiential nature of writing code. Think about writing a game. That inspires a kid. It's the kind of thing they go, hey, I would like to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's how it's visceral, right? When someone thinks about, that time they finally understood derivatives or integrals. For a lot of people, that moment is physics, right? They were using the math to do something that really mattered, and all of a sudden, they remember that forever. And that's the same thing we want to provide for algebra. That it's visceral and important. And they might not remember what the Pythagorean theorem is called, but they sure as heck remember that if you want to see how close 2 things are, you use that formula to make stuff
with the MIT App Inventor program, which is very similar. It allows you to design an interface on the screen, and then once you design the interface, to attach little blocks of code. How does this? Is this? I know, you're not going to say it's misguided. I mean, after all, it is Ableton. But how does this translate now into what you might be doing later?
Right, so I think when I use the term tinker toy language, I mean that not in any sort of large sense.
No, you just plug it in. It's so cool. You plug it in and it goes click and things work. And it's a great experience for people learning how to program.
So we've gotten really good at the sort of Lego block style of programming, right? Because that's a really valuable way to get people started, especially to get young students started. There's sort of, there's instant feedback, there's a quick way you can very quickly make something move around the screen. You're not worrying about syntax all that much. These block languages make it really easy to play. And play is valuable, I think. In particular, given the MIT heritage, we know how important play is for learning about things. But I think the challenge is there's this midpoint between getting into something through play and then mastering it as a profession. In art, for example, finger painting is great, right? It gives you a chance to play, to experiment, to build, it's low risk. But at some point, if you want to be a professional artist, there's this like middle ground where you learn all these techniques and you're learning the fundamentals. So maybe that's perspective, maybe that's shading, maybe that's studying art history somewhat. Finger painting alone isn't going to get you. And we all understand that. Same is true for math, right? There's lots of ways to play with math early on just to get a feel for things or a sense for things. But if you want to be a mathematician, at some point you need to learn fundamentals. So I think that I think there's been some amazing work that's been done, and I think we're missing mentioning Dan Garcia and his great work in STEM with these languages that are phenomenally good at getting kids excited and allowing them to play. I think what's sort of the new frontier right now is how do we transition? How do we start to build up these fundamentals for people, for students, so that they're ready to go on, whether it's going on to calculus or physics or something else that's not necessarily a hardcore programming job, although it often does include it, or to get them ready to move on to the hardcore actual computer science major. How do we bridge that? And so I would say that Bootstrap is a phenomenal way of taking students who are already engaged using these great tools and saying, all right, now you've had a chance to play. Now let's start thinking about the fundamentals of what it really means to decompose problems, to solve problems, and to write software. There's an awful lot more to it than what you've been doing maybe as experimenting with blocks. So we're going to start gently introducing you to what that more really means.
Talking to Emmanuel Schatzer, he is creator of Bootstrap. Find it at bootstrapworld.org in just a moment. First, though, a word from personal capital. Let's talk a little bit about money. Remember Bill Harris on Triangulation a few weeks ago? Creator of Personal Capital. He founded PayPal with Elon Musk. He was CEO into it, learned a lot about finance, but realized there was a big gap. And I have to agree, there is a big gap, especially for us baby boomers, but even young people, between putting money aside, putting it in savings, knowing we have to plan for the future, plan for a rainy day, plan for retirement, and how we manage that. And there's often two paths people go. You don't have to worry about that. That's the next step with financial advice. Now, you don't have to take advantage of this, but once you put more than $100,000 in assets, and use the advisors if you wish, and if you link on more than org, I talk a lot about, we always get questions, and yet you're getting kids comfortable with programming, with thinking in a kind of a organized way, with problem solving, and you're also teaching, I think this is important, skills that will be useful for them if they do become professional computer programmers or computer scientists. Everything in here it's test-driven, right? Design. You're learning how to design programs, literally.
Yeah, so what we do is called example-driven development, which is a little bit different than test-driven development, but any math teacher will recognize it. So your average math teacher, whenever they have their students solve a problem, the first thing they do is walk through a couple of concrete examples to make sure that a student can reason about this problem in a specific sense. So if it's a word problem about, a train moving 80 miles an hour, rather than saying, all right, kid, go and solve the general sense, first they want to walk through, well, how far has the train gone after 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? And by scoping out these examples, students then start to see a pattern, and then they can derive the general solution. So this is something that every math teacher already does. It's totally common in a math classroom. And so we're applying that to the programming domain. So it's very similar to test-driven development. Basically, we say, if you can't think of how to test your code or how it would work for even one example, you don't have business writing the code at all. So by starting with that, kids develop a really firm sense of how to write their code.
And it's a great, the number one thing I hear people complain about in math is word problems. I can't solve that. So it gives you tools for breaking it down and actually solving it. And I don't think I learned those in school, That's that transference you're talking about, where I learned how to do it by rote more than anything else.
Yep. That's right. I mean, algebra, ironically enough, it's got this bad reputation as the time math gets scary.
Right.
But algebra is actually the time math gets creative and cool.
It gets cool. It goes beyond arithmetic.
Anything other than solving word problems all day long.
Right. I love it. How much is it, if a school wants to do this, do you charge for the curriculum? How does this work?
So if you've got a motivated teacher and a lab full of computers and web browsers, you don't need to pay anything at all. The curriculum is freely available on our website, bootstrapworld.org. The software is freely available as well. Everything is free. The student workbooks that I was holding up earlier, you can buy them from a publisher. I think they're about $8 a kid, but the PDF for that exact same workbook is also available on the website for free. So, if you're an individual school, you can jump right in. If you want professional development, we offer really high quality workshops for math and computer science teachers. We've actually got a big one coming up in Philadelphia this August. It's open to any teacher from any district. August 5th, 6th, and 7th. It's a 3-day workshop held at the University of Pennsylvania School of Engineering, so we're grateful to them for hosting us. And any teacher or adult who wants to get invested and check out what this thing looks like can come and get trained. Finally, we also partner directly with school districts. So we work with school districts who will sign up with us to train a large number of their algebra or computer science teachers, and we'll work with them over a period of years to develop their own in-house bootstrap training team so that they can be totally self-sufficient.
I mentioned that workshop in Philadelphia in August is a $150 registration fee. It's really affordable. That includes all the materials, and you get 21 hours of professional development. That is a great price. And again, it's all free. And what I really like, I think a lot of schools have iPads or Android tablets, or they have Chromebooks, and they can't install software. You've made this with WeScheme. You've made this possible even in a browser through this whole curriculum for free. I think that's such a kid.
That's right. Yeah, well, I think this gets to a really important issue that's often not really discussed, which is equity. Right, so if you're in a school district where you've got an IT professional in your school who can do installation and provision for you, that's great. But so many schools, especially the schools who need it the most, don't have the ability to install software. So if you want to use Bootstrap with this Racket language, bam, WeScheme is right in the browser.
So great.
We also have an advanced curriculum that allows you to use another language called Pirate. It looks a lot like Python. That runs in the browser. So in terms of technical equity, we want to make sure that any kid can learn to program. And by targeting Algebra 1, we're making sure that it's every kid, right? Not just the kids who opt into the programming class. It doesn't matter, what color skin you have. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. Everybody takes Algebra 1. So if you want to get programming to really be available for everyone, you got to get into the mainstream classes with a software tool that runs in the cloud. So that's what we're all about, and that's where we put in our work.
That's so great. I noticed that you have partnered with code.org. Those are the Hour of Code folks. I want to push people in this direction instead of saying, just go to Code Academy and learn JavaScript. It's just this is the right way to learn. It's so easy to integrate it into your existing curriculum without a computer science curriculum. It's free, and so many teachers don't get the professional development support they deserve. They don't get they're using their own time and money often to teach this kind of stuff. This is a great solution for them, for Algebra 1 teachers, for computer science teachers. What about, and you don't have to address this specifically, I'm just curious, I know there are a lot of people watching who are adults, people like me, who would still like to learn to code, and I would encourage them to kind of learn right, and then learn Ruby on Rails or JavaScript or .NET. Where would you go if you were an adult wanting to do this?
Well, there's a lot of resources out there. Obviously, if I'm putting on my self-promotional hat, I would say, come join us in Philadelphia. $150, spend 3 days and learn this stuff, right? This is open to anybody right now. So if you want to, have a really high-quality PD where you learn what it is to code and what it means to teach someone else, that's a great opportunity. All of our materials you can also work through on your own. You don't need to be a classroom teacher. You can just check it out. It's a gently, let's say,
Say it's out code. I talked to mine, is Robin. I talked to her for about half an hour, told her a little bit about me. I said, look, I'm not a hipster.
Other states, maybe algebra is a 9th grade class. And then even for the states that are doing it, who might have failed, and I or any of us really
Logical topics, and it's the right way to do it. Of course, every mobile device has a Twit app. We didn't.
Visit prosper.com/twit and receive a $50 Visa gift card. Get a loan. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about
That's beneficial to them to the point that they may be willing to pay for this. There is not a set price yet. We get a sense that they're still kind of experimenting. It's just right now being rolled out with some pilot companies, so it's not broadly available only until Q3 is what they say. But yeah, I think that there's a reason they're charging for it, right? Is that it provides a benefit to companies. I don't think that working users would pay for it, but in terms of whether your app pays for it, whether it is, you think, all right, this may bring recruits and checking out our job postings or coming to the page. And of course, we're arguing that it's kind of beneficial. So it'll be interesting.
Plus, in Southeast Asia, some of them computers, and then when they put a portable hard drive in there, we talked mostly about the Apple Watch. We got one from Neil Goods, who said, "Hi, I love the show. I always learn something on TNT and other Twitch shows, and I'm writing to let you know that I ordered a stainless steel Milanese Luke." That's the one that we mentioned earlier that cost like $150 extra or something like that. And he's looking forward to receiving it on the 24th. So he's one of the, presumably a fan. Yeah. And you out there, you can top that. Come on. Maybe. Good luck. Anyway, how do you watch or listen to TNT, and how do you unlock your smartphone? Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup. Post it on Google Plus, Twitter, Facebook, and Tech News Today. You can follow. $5 off your first purchase by entering the code security now at checkout.
And so we're going to hear from our listeners. I found 10 great questions, which Mike will read and I will then answer at the second half of the show. And we're going to cover the week's news. I sent a note to Leo and a whole bunch of email addresses of the people who I normally send show notes to every week over the weekend because the EFF, our friends at the Electronic
Frontier Foundation.
Frontier Foundation. I could never remember that. It just seems like an awkward acronym.
It'll always be EFF to me.
Yeah, so EFF. Everyone's been a little bit on pins and needles over this podcast patent suits that have been launched by Personal Audio, I think was the name of the company, that was a user classic patent troll. So we'll talk about it as a root pipe vulnerability. But Leo and I sort of discovered on the fly last week about the disturbing ordering of cipher suites. It was B of A that we looked at, where the B of A server was offering the worst possible ordering of cipher suites, and a lot of our listeners have followed up on that too. So a bunch of great news for the week and then Q&A.
I don't know about you, Steve, but I can't wait. I'm looking at some of the stuff, and it's so fascinating, and we cover a lot of this
we invented podcasting, and everyone's into it. At this who where it does the
Taxio box in Eastern Texas and say that they're headquartered there, then this is where the lawsuits take place, and then they often
community this odd is the basically what I'm now where
Microsoft really kisses the Chinese government's behind. Apple kisses their behind more than any other company in the world. They were under attack. Apple's about to
even up
this and that.
machines which were known to be infected because they ended up tracking down the 14 distributed command and control servers located in the Netherlands, in the U.S., in Luxembourg, Poland, and Russia, and did a coordinated takedown of those 14 servers. Well, if they're able to monitor those servers, they're able to get the IP addresses of all the infected machines which are phoning home to those servers for botnet instructions. And so that's how they know how many machines are infected and the rate of infection. The U.S. had the highest rate at 22%, almost a quarter of the total infections, followed by 11% each, and Canada and Russia at 4% each.
We're number one.
Yeah, exactly. And the infections were exploiting known vulnerabilities. So these are machines not being maintained. So probably not a large percentage of this podcast's or even the Twit Network's listeners, because these people are going to tend to be more tech savvy. But so they were exploiting known vulnerabilities in Java, in Adobe Flash, in Microsoft Silverlight in order to get themselves in. And what was installed was a highly stealth backdoor Trojan, which was morphing itself every few hours in order to be essentially polymorphic, as the term is, in order to make itself continually undetectable from existing AV tools. And what's really sneaky is, we've talked about, just in the last couple of weeks, we were talking about how websites that, in fact, it may have been in reference to the Chinese DDoS attack, because remember that they were using, in that case, they were using the Beidou analytics. The Beidou system has an analytics system, much like Google Analytics, where all sorts of websites all over the place have a little bit of JavaScript, which is added to their page, which causes the user's browser to query to query and pick up that JavaScript, and then feed statistics back to headquarters in order to generate stats in the same way that Google Analytics does. Well, what this Trojan was doing was it was modifying the Windows hosts file for connect.facebook.net and google-analytics.com. So where we were talking last week was that this notion of all these little Facebook icons, the Facebook-like icons that are everywhere now, all of those essentially phone home. They pull from connect.facebook.net. That's where that little icon comes from. So what that means is, if you get something in your machine which modifies the hosts file, as we discussed before, the hosts file is the first place that Windows goes for DNS lookups. Before it asks any external DNS server, it looks in the so-called hosts file that Windows still has, and this hails from the original Unix hosts file, which is where all this internet technology came from. And any domain which is present in the hosts file is looked up in that file. So the idea was that this backdoor Trojan for the SIMD botnet would put the IP address of one of these 14 command and control servers in the host file, intercepting lookups, the user's machine's lookups for connect.facebook.net and google-analytics.com, meaning that any website that the user went to that had a Facebook-like icon or that had Google Analytics running on the page in order to generate statistics and Google Analytics for that site would actually end up connecting to the botnet and open a vector of control and potential infection. So this was big and nasty, and what it took was a joint task force of both private security companies and law enforcement to decide, okay, we found them all, let's take them all down, and that botnet is now out of action. So
Nice.
Yeah,
Unbelievable. That is incredible.
now. There's a so-called root pipe is the name that's been given to this, a privilege escalation bug, which was responsibly reported in early October of last year to Apple by security researcher Emil Gavarnhamar. I think I got that name about right. And he named it root pipe. He discovered the problem because he was going to be going to a security conference. Basically, he needed something to talk about. So he just thought, okay, I'll just poke at OS 10 for a while. And he did some binary code analysis and ended up finding this. And just because he sort of wanted to. I mean, he didn't stumble on it. He said, I need to find something to talk about. So he plowed in and found this thing, told Apple about it. Apple said, thank you very much. Now, they're all very, low-key. They don't tend to disclose the way, for example, Microsoft does. Apple just says, oh, yes, we fixed a few things and, don't worry about it. So he tweeted on October 6th, a few days after talking to Apple, he said details on the root pipe exploit will be presented, but not now. Let's just give Apple some time to roll out a patch to affected users. So he did the responsible thing. So it got patched with this most recent update that we had a few days ago. But somewhat controversially, Apple has said they're not going to patch earlier versions of Mac OS X. They said that it required a lot of changing around of things and that it's just not worth their time. So this has angered some people who, for whatever reason, aren't staying current with the latest version and are on earlier ones. I have seen some documentation of an alternative, and I was first thinking that I would provide links and some coverage, but it is a mess. I mean, it's like not the sort of thing you want to go off and do yourself. So the problem is the classic, the problem is that there is